Hello, everyone. This is the Insider Threat Podcast, an ISO 3103 1980 compliant show where we explore issues with the human factor and its impact on security and business. I'm your host, Steve Higdon. In this episode, we cover some ideas for Cybersecurity Awareness Month, Facebook, and more. Don't touch that dial. Welcome back. This is episode 44 of the Insider Threat Podcast for the week of October 22nd, 2018. So everything's been really busy for me lately, obviously, since I haven't been able to get another episode out in a little while. The weather's been cooling down, Halloween's almost here, and as you guys know, if you've been listening for a while, I have one or two kids, let's just say. So this time of the year is usually really big for me and my family. Now, it's getting close to the end of Cybersecurity Awareness Month, so I have to ask you all, what have you done during this month? We'll get into a little bit more of that here in a little bit when we get to the main discussion topic for this episode, but I also wanted to give you guys an update on the framework that we're working on. Now, in case you're new here, maybe this is your first episode, or just in case you missed the last couple of episodes, I'm working on an insider threat protection framework. It's basically a document that has a list of controls, insider threat controls that you can implement in your organization to improve your insider threat protection posture. And I haven't been able to go quite as fast as I originally hoped. I think I got all of the policy controls down, which I'm really happy about, and some of the technology controls. I'm still working on those as we speak. In fact, I'm hoping I can knock out 5 or so more of these controls dealing just with technology today. So we'll see how that goes. Anyway, it's time for your Infosec Trivia Question, where Google is king and the prize is non-existent. The question last episode was, in 1998, U.S. Congress approved the release of a famous report on the internet. This caused several websites to crash due to extremely high traffic volume. What was this report? The answer was the investigation report of President Bill Clinton's impeachment. Now, I didn't need those exact words, but I accepted pretty much anything that came close. Now, I've actually read this, and it really opened my eyes to the true story, or at least what was found during the investigation. It's not necessarily the same thing that was being reported by the news agencies at that time. Now, I don't want to be political or anything like that, and I've done a pretty good job for the past, year and a half we've been doing this. But just imagine if something like this happened today. If we had an investigation of this magnitude, and some would say that we actually have recently had investigations of this magnitude and at the same level. But I ask myself, if this happened today, would it still bring down the internet? And I understand bandwidth has gotten better. There's a lot of Akamai and things like that. We're not going to have these sort of accidental DDoS attacks unless maybe your name is, the FCC. But put technology aside, would culture today or society today have that much of an impact if, a report of this nature were to come out? I don't know if it would. Just some things to chew on there. I don't know. Some things that just crossed my mind while I was recording it today. So anyway, I digress. Congratulations to Thomas from Alachua, Neil from Ottowa, and Ruby from Indiana for getting the correct answer. Here's your question for this episode. On October 10th, 1980, a company called Midway released the first true mega-hit video game in history. What was the name of this game? Send your response to infosecanswer@gmail.com. Be sure to include your first name, location, and the hashtag fever. So now let's get into the actual discussion topic for this episode. And I did hint at it earlier. It's just a list of ideas for Cybersecurity Awareness Month. Now, you may be yelling at your screens right now, hey, Steve, this would have been really awesome to have 3 weeks ago when Cybersecurity Awareness Month actually started. And to that, I've got nothing, really. I'm sorry. I definitely should have put this out sooner. But for the time we have left, and maybe even you can go back and listen to this next year, you might be wondering what you can do to capitalize on this time to improve your organization. Now, first things first, you can't just go into this without a full-fledged plan. You've got to be intentional. And then after you've got this plan and you've got your intentions, you've got to communicate them to both the leadership so they have buy-in, but also to the users in your organization if you want any hope to getting the sort of support that you need for this to be successful. And as a part of this plan, a good idea is to develop a list of initiatives for the entire month, and you should at least be doing one thing weekly. If you've got more than that, that's great. But another key thing to think about here is you don't want to do too much in too short a period of time. There's a big reason for that. You don't want to experience burnout, both for yourself and for the people in your organization, because that's bound to be what happens if you go too overboard for the month. And this is especially the case if it's not something that the people in your organization are used to having. But on that note, I think it's an ancient Chinese proverb that says the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, but the second best time is right now. Because if an intentional effort during Cybersecurity Awareness Month is what serves as a catalyst to get you to do this thing that I like to call continuous cybersecurity awareness, then that's great, and I'll cheer you on all day long. Now let's get into the specific things that you can do. One thing that I see a lot of organizations come out with is articles or newsletters during Cybersecurity Awareness Month. And that's exactly what we did this year. I teamed up with our physical or industrial security department, depending on what you call them in your organization, and we talked about insider threat. Who'd have thought, right? The guy who hosts the only insider threat podcast on the internet decided to write about insider threat in the company newsletter. But it actually turned out great, and we got a lot of really positive feedback from it. Some people do really good with, print material, things that they read, as when it comes to getting new information. Some don't, and that's why I'm going to give you my second tip here. You can create or even just share. You don't have to create them in a lot of cases. Little short training videos. And the key thing to keep in mind here, especially when it comes to video, is the shorter is better. Because anything over than 5 to 10 minutes, and you're going to start losing people's attention span. They've seen those types of cybersecurity training videos before. And they're strangely similar to those death by PowerPoint security presentations that we've talked about several times on this show. And it doesn't have to be dull or boring. In fact, you're probably going to get the most success if you have little things that are, cute or funny or that sort of thing. Make your videos tell a story around the information, not just provide the information. And that's the best way to keep people's attention. Another thing you can do, and a lot of organizations do this as well, is hold brown bag training events. Now, I think it was last year at around this time that I told you that I went to one of these and they were talking about insider threat and phishing. It was actually put on by the company called PhishMe. And if you remember, this is a time when ransomware was rampant all across the internet. It was crazy. It was in all the headlines. Everybody was getting some sort of ransomware incident. And when I was leaving that training event, I stepped into the elevator and there were 2 women that walked in with me. And on that elevator ride down, they were talking about how ransomware and losing all their family information on their personal computers was their biggest fear. Now, I'm not strictly an advocate to training in these fear-based scenarios, but that was obviously extremely effective. And it was very encouraging for me as well. Now next, and I've talked about this before, anytime you're giving any sort of cybersecurity awareness lesson, it's so important to bring the message home. If you tell them that this is what you can do to keep your family and your friends and your loved ones safe, and oh, by the way, this also helps to increase the security posture of the workplace, that's so much more impactful than just concentrating on work. Now, next, I want to share the thing that I've been doing with my own organization for several months now, and I send out a 5 to 10 minute audio file just through email to everyone in the organization, and I do this once a week, and the feedback that I've gotten for this, it has been outstanding. The nature of the work for the employees in my organization is one that they're usually in the car. They do a lot of traveling, a heck of a lot of traveling. All day long, they're driving back and forth doing things. So by sending a 5-minute audio file that they can listen to while they're on their commute to one of these locations in their car, they just love it. It helps to break up their day and it gives them some really good information. Now, that may not work for everybody, but it certainly does for us. And finally, and you'll hear something similar to this anytime anybody's talking about Cybersecurity Awareness Month, but that's don't stop when November 1st comes around. If you build a habit of giving this sort of information, and if your employees build a habit of receiving cybersecurity awareness information over the period of an entire month, then there's no reason why you can't continue it. Now, sure, maybe you don't have to do those kind of novelty Cybersecurity Awareness Month events like skits and bake sales and whatever else anybody does, but you can still continue to spread the information on at least a weekly basis. You've been doing it for an entire month. They've been listening for an entire month. There's no reason why you can't continue that. So anyway, that's all I've got for that main topic. If you want to share with me, actually please do. I ask that you share with me some things that you've done during Cybersecurity Awareness Month, some creative ways that you've used to spread the information. Please share those with me and I'll try to compile them and find some way to send them out or make them available to everybody, because I think this is important stuff. Now for the news, and if you haven't gotten enough of this topic, I want to talk to you about the Facebook breach. So first we have to ask, was it 50 million? Was it just 29 million? Look, who knows? And to be honest, it doesn't really matter. The bottom line is that a heck of a lot of Facebook user accounts were compromised. Now, so far, when I've been talking to my friends and family, the biggest impact that I've seen from all of this is that people are getting friend requests from people they were already friends with. So this had to do with cloned accounts. A lot of people got their accounts cloned, and if I were to speculate, and this just about never goes well, but let's say it is 29 million Facebook accounts. So the attackers were able to get information on that many people, but by cloning those accounts and friending everybody who they're friends with, maybe they can increase that information. So that personal information belonging to Facebook users, by using those 29 million and friending all of their friends, they can kind of try to steal as much of the other information as possible. Now, is this what happened? I don't know. Again, just speculation. But I provided a link in the show notes to some things that you can do to stay safe. And this isn't just for you. If you're listening to this, you probably don't have a very big problem when it comes to this sort of thing. But I guarantee if you're in the position, like we just talked about, if you're the person doing things for Cybersecurity Awareness Month, then in my opinion, it's your responsibility to share this information with the users in your environment. We might get it, but I guarantee that there's several people in your organization and in your family and your friends who don't really get it. And I'm certainly not blaming them for that, but I feel as though it's our responsibility as information security professionals to help people. That's our sole job. We're in the customer service industry, kind of. Our job is to analyze and improve people and organizations. So enough of that soapbox. Our closing thought for this episode comes from Steve Jobs. He said, "Your work is going to fill a large part of your life, and the only way to be truly satisfied is to do what you believe is great work. And the only way to do great work is to love what you do. If you haven't found it yet, keep looking. Don't settle. As with all matters of the heart, you'll know when you find it." Thank you for listening to this episode of the Insider Threat Podcast. Please remember to subscribe and review in your favorite podcast app, and also share with everyone you know. Those reviews are key to building this out and improving for later episodes, so please feel free to leave suggestions. You can contact me on Twitter @Steve Higdon, or send an email to steve@theinsiderthreatpodcast.com. Go to our website, which is again www.theinsiderthreatpodcast.com, to find the show notes for this and every other episode, as well as links to the topics we've covered. You can also go to the website to find a link to the Patreon page and subscribe to the newsletter to get up-to-date information on current episodes and news for the show. Call and leave a voicemail at 443-292-2287 to have a conversation, get a comment added to the show, or even ask a question. Thanks again, and I'll see you folks next time.